Jerome Maldonado, and this is our first time going live on YouTube. So we appreciate you guys, first and foremost, tuning in. And second, we appreciate you guys working through some of the quirks with us, even though we're running a few minutes late. So we thank you guys. So we are doing real estate talk with Jerome Maldonado live every Friday, 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So I'm excited to have you guys join. We're going to be bringing in some special guests here in the near future, but you guys are going to be with me solo this morning. And so today's topic, what we're going to be going over today that I'm excited about, is graduating from residential real estate investing to commercial real estate investing. So we ran a survey this past week, and we had several questions on there, and we asked a lot of our followers to join in and help us with the survey to see what interests they had specifically in real estate. And 100% of everybody who opted in for that survey said that they want to graduate from residential to commercial real estate. So today's first topic, we wanted to service that audience and make sure that we came loud and clear to get people interested from going from residential to commercial real estate. And I think one of the big things, is people's mindset. And we're going to go into that here in a minute. But before we do that, I want to just go over some house cleaning stuff and let you guys in on a lot of big things that we have going on. So a lot of people are unaware there's a new app called Clubhouse. And if you guys are on Clubhouse, I want you guys to go into that app, look for Jerome Maldonado and friend me and follow me. We're doing some really cool stuff. It's a lot of free training and stuff. And it's just on a beta test right now. And so we're going to be that app, I think, is going to blow up here in the near future. Plus, if you guys do receive one of our surveys, help us out. I want you guys to go and fill that survey out, because if you help us help you, we'll be able to get more content, more information out directly to you that feeds the knowledge and information you guys need and you guys are thriving for. And so we'd love to be able to help you. So help us help you become successful in the real estate investing game, and love to be able to get you guys any of the information that you guys are interested in learning in. Next Friday, we're going to have a special guest. I'll kind of let you guys in once we have things confirmed, so keep an ear out for that. Now, we're going to be taking live calls here in just a little bit. We're going to move through this, but we're going to let you guys call in. We want to hear from you guys. You guys are going to be calling in to 505-610-1717. That's 505-610-1717. We'll be taking calls here momentarily. But today, I'm excited to take you guys on your graduation course from going from residential real estate investing to commercial real estate investing. And, I remember years ago, when I got started in this real estate game, I did it not to be a real estate professional. What I did it for was to stabilize my assets. I knew that being in real estate would give me an asset that I could actually go in, utilize to be able to stabilize my long-term asset base. And so one of the big things was I had rode the roller coaster ride in business, the ups, the downs, and I had struggled through my early years of direct sales, network marketing. We had some ups and downs with traditional business, and I started buying rental homes because I didn't know anything about real estate. So I know there's a lot of people on here, and the first thing that comes to most people's mind when they think about investing in real estate is, hey, let me buy a rental house. And so I did the exact same thing. In 1998, I bought my first rental home. And not knowing anything about real estate, I thought, okay, I can have this home, I can rent it, I can pay it off, and I can buy multiple of them, and all the rental income will be my money over the long haul. Well, I'll tell you that the first house I rented, everything seemed to go okay initially, although it was a lot of work to renovate and get on the market. It was an older home, and I was excited about it. I leased to people that told me they weren't going to have pets and dogs, and they came into the property and they tore up the property a little bit. And I had a second rental home going at that exact same time. And we had a utility issue where there was a big storm. A tree came down, ripped the whole entire utility service off the entire house in the middle of the night. The whole yard was flooded because it was raining so much outside. And we had to get the utility company out at like 3 o'clock in the morning as an emergency call to get the power shut down. The people in the other house had a mess with their pit bull. And I love dogs. I'm a dog lover. But it was at a point where it was at a point of financial distress for my rental, and it was very extremely stressful because they fought with me the entire time. And then I bought my third rental home, and that one went really well. Although we had small logistical issues, I decided the single family residential sector just wasn't my forte. I just didn't care for it. And so about equally in time, I was running my construction company and real estate development company out of my house. I had work trucks, had an acre worth of land, had work trucks parked. My neighbors hated me because we lived down a dirt road. My guys would come flying down the road. Dust would be flying everywhere. And the neighbors took me to court when the municipality that we lived in. They said, Jerome, you've got to get out your business out of your house. You guys are running an industrial business at a place where it's zoned for residential. So they said, hence, you need to find a property that's zoned for what you need. So I went out looking and searching for commercial properties. And we would just drive around the neighborhood that we lived in looking for commercial properties. And lo and behold, I found an old distressed building that was 8,000 square feet. And my whole mindset kind of started from direct sales and network marketing, when back in the day, and some of you guys may have heard this story before and some of you guys may have not, but we used to run training centers in our sales offices. We didn't do business for our network marketing company out of the Denny's restaurants and out of hotel lobbies like most of them do. And now they do them on Zoom and online. Everything's done virtually, and that's how people build their network marketing direct sales companies now. Well, back in those days, we developed training centers. We were the first direct sales company that worked out of training centers, and the way we paid the rent in our offices was by renting desk space. We'd go to Walmart, buy these inexpensive Formica top desks. We'd build them, and we'd put like 10 of them in an office, and we'd rent them for $500 a desk or $250 for half a desk. And so what we would end up doing is being able to afford the rental space, the lease on that property, plus it actually gave us income to be able to live, eat, and breathe while we were trying to figure out how to run our network marketing company, which I was horrible at for the first 2.5 years. And so lo and behold, the same concept came to mind in commercial real estate, as I had facilitated in early years in direct sales and network marketing right through my own sales office. So I thought to myself, okay, I don't want to pay rent for a place because I'd already been running my business out of my house. I didn't want to incur those costs. But what if I acquired an asset and I let other people pay for my asset on my behalf? Just simple concepts from books like Think and Grow Rich, utilizing other people's money to help you succeed financially. Just all those little tiny logistics from all these success books that I had been putting into my mind for the last decade. And so I went out and bought a building bigger than I needed to go out and facilitate my business out of. I took a small sector for the office. I utilized the back portion of that building to store my equipment and work trucks, and I leased the other 4 suites. And just like you guys, my dad, I brought him down. I love my dad, but he's Mr. Pessimistic, and as much as I love him, we're night and day as far as personalities. I'm very optimistic, always type A, moving forward on things. My dad is real conservative, right? So I'm excited. I'm like, hey, Pops, come down, take a look at this property I bought. So he comes down, walks the whole property. At the end, he sits back and looks at it and goes, so Jerome, tell me, what happens if you can't lease it? And I sat back stumped for a second, and I go, I never ever thought about that. And I'm not going to start thinking about that right now. And I said, you know what? Oh, we'll lease it, Dad. We'll lease it. And I was confident that we would. And the reason why was I knew that if I created a product that was better than anything around me, that why wouldn't one of those businesses come in and lease from me if I leased it for a very similar or close to lease rate as them? You just have to buy the property right. Well, how do we do that? And so I bought that property for about $225,000. I went in, I renovated for about $50,000. So for under $300,000, I had 5 units, and I had the mortgage paid. And not only did I have the mortgage paid, but I probably had about $2,500 a month in passive residual income just from the rental units of that suite. So some of you guys are sitting back right now and going, okay, Jerome, how does that work for me? And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about, because the limiting belief is that residential is just safer, easier, and less expensive to buy than commercial real estate. So one of the big things I want you guys to understand is it's not. You can get into commercial real estate for the same cost as getting into residential real estate. I know a lot of investors, they'll go in after real small homes that cost $80,000, $100,000, $150,000, even a couple $100,000, but I have friends that are going in and buying rental homes that are in excess of $250,000, and they still need work. And so you can get good lease rates in regards to some of the nicer homes, but your cash on cash return is always better if you have a lower acquisition rate, obviously, in a neighborhood that bears good high rental rates, okay? And so same thing goes in commercial. And so one of the big things that I want you guys to understand is it does not cost more money to go in and purchase commercial real estate. I want you guys to for a second, get that concept out of your brains and understand that on the front end, commercial real estate costs just as much as residential real estate to get started in, depending on the type of property that you're purchasing. Now, here's the difference, okay? Is that, and this is what makes everything in commercial real estate exciting to me. Because when I bought residential real estate, I thought that once I rented those properties, I'd have this cash flow coming in. The problem is that houses have a lot. You got each house you have has a kitchen. Each house you have has multiple bathrooms. Each house you have has a yard, roofs, everything that is on a commercial building that you have one of. The difference is in residential, you solely are responsible if a tenant clogs your toilets, if the heating and cooling system goes out, you're responsible for all the property taxes, all the expenses on that property. If they damage your landscaping, guess who gets to repair it at their cost? You do. And so I started realizing very early on in residential real estate that the expenses to keep a single family home running the way it needed to were becoming very absorbent, and my cash on cash returns were very, very small, and I didn't have a very big buffer. Now, commercial real estate, let me explain to you guys. They cost the same on the front end, but on the back end, commercial real estate will always cost you less than residential real estate once it's stabilized. And here's why. Commercial real estate is super cool because when you understand that when you facilitate a simple lease in commercial real estate, even if you're renting to a mom and pop store, there's what's called a triple net lease, and the tenant takes care of everything. There's also what's called a modified gross lease, which means that the tenant takes care of part of the expenses, but you also take care of part of the expenses. And so when you're renting units to mom and pop retail or office or warehouse or industrial and whatever you're going into, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, one of the cool things is that you can go in and have the tenant absorb the costs of everything that they're utilizing in there on your behalf. So all that you're taking care of is the structure of the building itself and the roof line of that building. They're taking care of the clogged toilets. They're taking care of any issues that are happening in that building. We even make all our tenants, when they sign their lease, they take care of glass and glazing. If someone comes in, there's vandalism, graffiti, they take care of it. If they need their locks changed, someone breaks in, they take care of that stuff. If they come in and light bulbs need to be changed, that's the tenant's responsibility. And so what's really cool is we even charge them what's called common area fees in commercial real estate. So if they come in and they start and they have issues with the landscaping, those common area fees are charged back to the tenant. So if their clients break your curbs, if their clients break your parking blocks, if the landscaping gets damaged from someone driving through it, it's those common area fees that pay and facilitate the costs of the renovations and the fixing and repairs of our parking lot and all our open space on all our commercial buildings, which is incurred by the tenant. And so that's the way commercial real estate works standard across the board, unless you get a small mom and pop guy or gal that has a small property and they rent it like it was a residential home, which isn't real typical. So when you're renting commercial real estate, one of the big things is you become a teacher. You become an educator for small business owners that have never rented before. And so if you start renting to them, you just educate them through the means of the lease of how they work. And so one of the big things is understanding that commercial real estate costs just as much as residential real estate to get started, but on the back end, it costs you significantly less. Now, some of you guys are sitting back going, okay, how does it cost the same amount as residential? Well, it's just like anything in life. You have to shop based on an acquisition price that works for you. And so what I'm telling you guys now is look at properties, commercial properties. Right now, industrial warehouse space is one of the big things I've been preaching for the last 2 years, and we've been buying all over the country. In fact, we're working to facilitating a call with a seller on a property down in Illinois right after this live call on a property that we've been working on for the last 2 months. And so industrial warehouse space, there's over 1 billion square feet needed. And I know you guys have probably heard me say this like a broken record over the last couple years. There's over 1 billion square feet needed over the next 5 years just to service e-commerce. And so with the growth of e-commerce, there's going to be a huge need for warehouse space. Now, some people don't understand exactly how that works, but you get the big Amazons companies, right? You get the big Walmart companies, Target. This property happens to be right by one of the largest 3M warehouses in the country. And you get these big, massive buildings that are taking up hundreds of thousands of square feet. And so I understand that most of you guys can't go in and buy several hundreds of thousands of square feet of real estate, but you can go in and take what's called the trickle effect. And the trickle effect is when large developers, big builders go in and they start building these massive warehouses. Other companies want to be around the growth of those industries. And so what I've always done is I've always went in to see what the city development plans are prior to purchasing any piece of commercial real estate. So when we've developed land, we go in and talk to city planners and we say, okay, we understand that Amazon's coming in. We understand that Walmart's coming in. Where are they coming? Where are the housing developers moving towards? And then we come in and we pick up a small sector right in the pocket of where they're going to build, and we just get our own small little piece of the pie. And that's what we've been doing since the early 2000s. We'll go in and just purchase a little tiny piece of property and build ourselves a little 12,000, 15,000 square foot building right in that pocket. And as people start shopping for rents, there's going to be mom and pop shops. They're going to need places for restaurants, for beauty salons, barber shops. There's going to be little churches that go in. All that, those little service-oriented facilities will end up going into those properties. Warehouse works the exact same way. They're going to need mechanics. They're going to need print shops. They're going to need all types of industrial stuff to service the needs of those large warehouse facilities right around those same areas. And so those are the areas you'd be looking in. Same thing goes with retail. Same thing goes with office. Same thing goes with any sector of real estate in the commercial sector that you're going to be investing in. And so understand that when you go in, you start looking, you're looking for small, older, financially distressed properties. Not physically distressed, maybe slightly physically distressed, but you don't want to get killed on renovation costs either. So if you go in and you start shopping for stuff that it ranges from anywhere from $100,000 in acquisition price to $350,000 in acquisition price, you can pick those up with very low mortgage payments, and we'll talk about the financials on those later. But understand that you can have multiple doors, and that's the big thing is the multiple doors. You know, when we're going in, we're purchasing commercial real estate. One of the big things that I look for, I say, okay, does this property have 4 units on it at least? You know, and so if we come in and we say, okay, I have this retail center, it's really small. I know the retail is on bust right now. Everybody's losing their tail in retail. But there's always going to be a need for small retail. So for some of you guys that are watching this, we still own a bunch of real small retail. All our big stuff we've gotten rid of because of the financial distress in it. But even repositioning that stuff in warehouse space, you take those small retail centers and put a garage door on the back of those. You have semi-trucks, loading trucks as loading docks to be able to come in. Those properties are still extremely viable right now. And so you can, in fact, we've lost tenants, and I like to say we've actually cleaned house in our tenants, with our tenants over the last year, because the tenants that weren't paying well initially are the ones that paid worse when all of COVID and the pandemic hit, and we were just able to exit them out of the buildings, and now we're repositioning those same units with better tenants, which is awesome. So, you know, if you guys go in, you guys start looking for real estate, you guys start driving around, one of the big things you want to look for is acquisition price. Stuff that's maybe between 5,000 square feet and 10,000 square feet if it's your first property. You know, Lopez and I just bought a Krispy Kreme warehouse building in Staunton, Virginia, just outside of Richmond. And it wasn't a huge building. We did buy a bigger one just down the road from it, but it was a 7,700 square foot building. We leased that property. We paid $250,000 for that property. We leased it for $3,500 a month. Our cap rate on that was something like 13.5%. We have almost no expenses on that property right now. We put minimal amount of money into the property, and that thing's going to cash flow month after month for us for years to come. And so those little properties I like better sometimes than the big stuff because, one, they're easy to lease and they're safe. And the residual income from them is solid, it's strong. And so when you guys are going out, look for low acquisition price, low renovations. Go in, reposition the properties where you can come in and for a small amount of money, you can renovate, clean them up, clean up the landscaping. And what's awesome about industrial warehouse is you can just do interior cleanups, gut all the garbage out of it, and they're real simple. So there's not a lot of expense to renovations. Even retail, you go in, you gut the insides, all the walls, you get the walls painted real simple. You put down some real nice flooring in there, and then turnkey, you lease that stuff. You have a better facility than 90-95% of anything that's out in the marketplace close to you. And that's why commercial real estate is so much easier to lease than that's why commercial real estate is so nice, because if you just mark your property as just slightly better than anybody else in your neighborhood, you're always going to have a better, more viable property. Now, 4 units. Commercial real estate, guys, is not only considered just commercial buildings. I want you guys to understand that I know there's a lot of people on this call and they love multifamily, and I love multifamily too. In fact, I have 2 multifamily apartment complexes, and we have one that we're repositioning from a hotel to multifamily right now, and we have other ones that we're underwriting and negotiating terms on right now that we're purchasing. And so for all of you multifamily people that are sitting on this call going, okay, is he only going to talk about industrial warehouse space, retail, and office that are dying, or is he going to talk about multifamily? I'm going to talk about multifamily too, because a lot of people are always asking about triplexes. They're asking about fourplexes and quads, and those are great. Those are considered residential real estate. The banks consider those residential real estate. But once you get up over 4 units, it's all considered commercial real estate. It's all investment. It's all direct investment real estate as far as the banks consider it. And so one of the big things I always tell people, I like to see people get into real estate that has at least 15 to 20 doors on it. But I always tell people, don't go into small residential real estate that has 4 doors. Get at least 8 at the minimum. And here's why. When you do a fourplex, my experience, I remember going into Arizona back in 2009, and we started buying these little fourplexes, and we actually landed up acquiring 62 units of fourplexes. But in the interim time, we were picking up just fourplex at a time. And what I realized is that 1 unit on every fourplex, all it paid for was the trash, the water, and utilities. And then I had 3 units left to finance my mortgage if I had one, which I didn't on a lot of that because we bought it for such a great acquisition price. But most people will have a mortgage. And so you'll have 3 units now to be able to service your mortgage. Now, the only problem is you have to have all 4 units leased. So if you have 1 vacancy, which is very probable, you're going to be in a position where you have 2 units to service all your expenses and almost no cash flow. And that's one of the big reasons why I don't care for fourplexes. Now, once you have 8 units, things change a little bit. You get a little more comfortable. Your cash on cash return is still okay. It's not great, but it's okay. The big thing is you have a more stable asset. And so one of the big things is making sure that asset is stable long term. So that way, if a pandemic hits like COVID, if a financial crisis like 2008 hits, you are still solid financially, especially if you mortgage that property. And the biggest thing is we want to see you win. And so I encourage people, take a look at properties that have at least 8 doors. Once you have 8 doors, it's a commercial property. It's not considered residential anymore, even though it's the individual residential units. It's considered a commercial property. And so I always encourage people to move in that sector. Now, one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about is money, because people, that's their biggest dilemma. I think in the surveys, we asked them, okay, what's holding you back? What's holding you back from coming in and really moving forward in the commercial real estate sector? And we had everything all over the board. We had, mindset, and we had money, contacts, and tons of stuff. But by far, the mass majority of people, they want to know, how do I get started in this? How do I get money to finance these deals? So if that's you, one of the big things, when I got started is utilizing other people's assets as money, as capital. Let them be the bank. It's called owner financing. It's when the owners of that property become the bank. That's one way to finance commercial real estate. And so even the building that I sit in today, when I bought this property, the man worked a job. He inherited the property from his father, who was an entrepreneur. He owned a meat market, and his father had multiple properties. But this gentleman worked for the laboratories at Sandia National Lab here in Albuquerque, and he knew nothing about real estate. He knew nothing about business. He inherited this asset, he didn't know anything to do with it, and he was just sitting there getting more and more distressed every single day. And so his father had owned the asset, had no debt on it. And so when I landed up looking at the property, I just drove by it. I called on a sign. I talked to a broker. I asked as I started facilitating my interest in the property, I simply asked the broker, I said, I don't know that a bank is going to finance this thing, because I had talked to lenders at the time. And at that time, I knew nothing about financing in real estate. And I didn't know how a bank actually financed the real estate or anything. But what I learned really quick is that a commercial asset, even though you have a piece of real estate, a piece of land and a building, to a bank, they consider it almost worthless if it has zero cash flow. It's a liability to them. And so if it's a liability to them, wouldn't it also be a liability to me? And so you need to make the property cash flow. Well, how do you do that if the bank's not willing to lend you money and you don't have cash? Well, there's a few different ways, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is how you finance yourself into getting into that property and options to be able to do so. And so what I landed up doing was asking them if they would owner finance the deal. And ultimately, he wanted the capital out of the property, which a lot of owners do. But the good thing is that if they owner finance it, it offsets their long-term capital gains taxes. So one, it has a tax advantage for them. Plus, in those days, interest rates were slightly higher, so I was paying him 8% interest. And in today's world, I always tell people, try to get at least 6 to 7% APR on the interest rate on owner finance deals. And even if you got an 8% interest rate now, it's very viable to make properties work the same way they did 20 plus years ago when I first started buying real estate through owner finance deals. The ultimate goal, though, is to stabilize the property and get traditional financing. You'll hear me talk about that as we move forward here. But they landed up saying yes to it. I educated them on how it benefited them. And then we did what's called a 3-year call. A 3-year call is in 3 years from now, I had to move that mortgage over somewhere else. I either had to pay the building off in cash, I had to get a loan from a traditional institution, or I had to find money elsewhere to pay this gentleman back on his building that I purchased 3 years prior. But what it did is it gave me time. It gave me 3 years to come in, figure out the real estate game, renovate the property, get it sectioned off, get rentals facilitated. Now, when I stabilize the asset, it's now attractive to the bank. So you have options at this point in time. Hence, lo and behold, we were able to do it in 6 months. We were able to renovate, lease the whole property. I was occupying the property. It was an owner-occupied property, which the banks love. And we were able to reposition it. But we took advantage of the owner financing for the full term of the 3 years. And then we went back in afterwards and financed. Still get into properties because the owners don't typically check your credit. And if they do, the loan that they're giving you is not subject to your credit rating. They might ask you for a little bit larger down payment, but typically they'll still sell you the property, especially if you're interested and qualified and you have money, a little bit of capital to be able to buy. Now, some people are sitting back and they're going, okay, well, what if I have no capital? Well, here's what's cool. One thing that we've done in the past is you can get credit cards. And so if you have at least some credit and you have credit cards, you can go in, pay your monthly bills regularly. And if you're exercising the tools that the credit institutions do, you can call them regularly every 6 months and ask them for a credit increase. So you take a small little $5,000 credit card, you ask them for an increase to $10,000, then to $20,000, then to $30,000, and all you're doing is spending $500,000 on that credit card every single month and just paying it off. And so if you have small credit cards, ladies and gentlemen, you can do this yourself. Then when it comes time to be able to purchase a property like this, if you don't have capital, cash on hand, you can take your credit cards, the capital from your credit card, get a cash advance, pay for that down payment on your credit card, and then take owner financing on the deal. The whole goal is to stabilize that property really quick so you don't have the high interest rates if you have them on your credit cards. Get that paid down, get that rental income, pay that debt down, and now you have a cash flowing property that's gonna continue growing and moving for you for years and years to come. Okay, so that's how you can go in and do it with zero money out of your pocket. That's one idea. If you do have your own capital, well, that resolves that issue. You just go in and do the owner financing. Second way that you're gonna hear me talk a lot about is you're gonna hear me talk a lot about subject twos. How are we doing on time, Alec?
So we're about 40 minutes in.
About 40 minutes in right now? Okay. Do we have calls? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have some calls, I know some of you guys, I advertised this early on, but if you guys have questions on any of the information that we're going over right now, don't hesitate to call in. We're going to take 2 or 3 live calls today. The number is 505-610-1717. 505-610-1717. Call in. We're happy to take any calls. Now look, subject twos. People are sitting back. These were super popular 20 years ago. They're new now. And so subject twos are when someone has a note, they have a loan on the property, and they can't do owner financing because they do have a note on the property. The terms obviously have to be in favor of the property and the person buying it. But what a subject to is you assume that their note on behalf of the individual who originally owned it, subject to the original terms of that note. And so the bank at that point in time doesn't really care about the individual as a person. They don't really care about you. They just care that asset, because the asset itself, the building itself, is collateralizing the asset. And so they want to make sure that asset is protected. And if it's been paid down enough, but there's still debt on it, you can assume that note. You can have the title company, just like any purchase, they can deed you the property. And if you take over that loan, you just have to make sure that the terms are favorable to you being able to do what you need to do with that property. So it's subject to the original terms. So you just need to read the terms of that note, make sure that they're in your favor, and you can assume those notes, and you don't even have to have a lot of credit to do that. And so subject twos are going to become extremely popular over the next few years. They're coming back. They were popular 20 years ago, and they're going to continue getting more popular here in the near future. With everything that's happening with the moratoriums, with everything that's happening right now in the real estate market, supply and demand is crazy right now. There's not enough supply, huge demand for houses. Things are escalating as far as prices. People are over mortgaging their real estate in both the commercial and residential sector. And so who's going to be able to benefit from that? You guys, myself. And that's where we want to position ourselves with all of this that's going on right now. The other way is traditional financing. That's the third way you can finance it. So if you got good credit, you got a little bit of capital, banks are going to require 25 to 35% down depending on the asset class that you're buying. And it's going to depend if it has stable income. So if you get into a property where there's tenants set in place and there's income coming in, what happens, you can go to a financial institution and you can ask them for traditional lending on that asset. And then you just have to be able to afford the down payment on that, on the difference to be able to go in. Now, anytime there's financial distress in a marketplace, understand that the banks began asking for larger down payment amounts for the property because they want to protect themselves, right? They want to make sure that it is not a liability to the bank, that it's an asset to them. The more you pay down, the less the bank has in on that property, because a bank is a business just like any business. And that's what people have to understand. Real estate, you're in business just like any business. You'll have tenants that come to you wanting low lease rates, and you have expenses like property insurance. You're going to have property taxes. You're going to have maintenance and repairs. And if the numbers don't work, you don't facilitate a lease because you'll go bankrupt and lose the property. Hence, the banks are the exact same way. And so when a bank comes in and they're underwriting a deal, they're sitting back going, okay, what's my liability? And how can I get this debt paid down so much that I know I always have an asset and I can collateralize the asset and take that as collateral on the property? And if this gentleman, this woman, whoever it is, defaults, can I sell this property for the amount I have in to recuperate my money, the money that we lent out? And that's exactly how you purchase properties. And so understand that the ultimate goal long term is to get traditional financing. So if you go in, you buy a property that's financially distressed, either physically or financially, you go in, you renovate, you stabilize that asset with tenants. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to go back to a bank, and as soon as that happens, the valuation of that property skyrockets. It goes way up. So if you purchased a property for $250,000, you stabilize that asset, and let's say you have $80,000 a year in income coming in, that property now is worth over $500,000 to the bank. You can go in, your debt to income ratio fits the margin that they're looking for, so you don't have to come in with a 20%, 35% down payment anymore. You stabilize that asset. Now that asset just went up in value. That asset itself now has enough debt to income ratios. The asset has enough value to the bank that it hits that 75% or 65% loan to value ratio. So you don't have to go back in and put more money down on that property to refinance it with the bank because you stabilized it. And so I want you guys to understand this. If you guys are watching this right now, I want you guys to understand what I'm talking about right now. You don't have to, when you go back in and refinance these properties after you've owner financed them and you've stabilized your asset, if you did a subject to and you're trying to look for a better term, a better rate, you don't have to go back in and put more money down on that property. What you do is you stabilize it, you get cash flow. You make sure that that cash flow is coming in stronger than it was when you purchased that property. And once you do that, you go back to the bank, it's worth more. That property is worth more to the bank. And so now the bank considers that property a larger asset. It has a larger asset base. The value, the value of that property is now appraised for a higher value. So now your loan to value ratio is increased, meaning that you don't have to come in and put the down payment money. The asset itself grew. It grew up to be able to take care of that loan to value asset class, so you can go in and just refinance it and walk right into a better term on your mortgage and walk out without having to put more money into the property. The only way that doesn't work is if you don't stabilize it correctly, and if you don't have lease rates that support the value of that building to make so that you do have 65%, 75% loan to value after you refinance it, stabilize it, and lease the property. Same thing with residential. So if you have an 8-plex, 10-plex, 12-plex, same thing goes. You need those doors filled, and you need to have at least 80, 90% occupancy in that property and less than 5, 10% vacancies in there to stabilize that asset class and make sure that you're leasing it for fair market value of whatever that market bears in that given area. And the fourth way, ladies and gentlemen, is hard money. Hard money lenders. I know there's people on here that go, well, how about hard money lenders? You can go in, you can even get two hard money lenders. You can get one of them for a first and a second, but typically if you get a hard money lender for your second to pay for your down payment, it's usually at a higher interest rate. So you're motivated. That was a question on Wednesday's night's call is, can I get a second from a hard money lender, and how can I get that? Well, typically a hard money lender is going to lend you money at a higher rate of interest anyways. These guys are always wanting about 10 to 12% at least, sometimes even more. If you're doing hard money lending, try to stay within that 10 to 12% range. And as you stabilize that asset, go back to the bank. Don't take 2 years, 3 years. Set a goal. And depending on the size of that asset class that you're buying, depending on the size of that property, go in and renovate, stabilize that asset, and go in and then ask the bank for a traditional loan. Get it leased as fast as you can, and then pay off your hard money lenders. And that's the goal. Hard money lenders is a little different because you have to be motivated and you have to know what you're doing. I never recommend that new people get started with hard money lenders, and that's one of the reasons that I classified that as one of the last options as far as finances. Because for hard money lenders to work for you, you need to work for yourself first. And if you're just getting started in the game, I don't recommend doing business with hard money lenders unless you have a business partner that knows the construction, the renovation, the leasing, so forth and so on, so that you can stabilize that asset quick, get out of those hard money lenders so that they don't take that property from you, pay them off, and stabilize the asset with traditional lending. So anyways, the whole goal with commercial real estate, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly like the BRRRR strategy and everything else. You go in, you purchase the property, right? And so it's no different than residential. So if you have that limiting belief that this is so much harder than residential, you just have to think of it in the same terms as like the BRRRR strategy, which is you buy, you renovate, you rent, and then you repeat the process, right? Well, commercial property works the exact same way. And when you stabilize it, people don't even realize it, but you're basically doing the commercial burst strategy, where you're going in, you're buying an asset that's either financially or physically distressed. You're stabilizing that asset, and then financially, you renovate it first, then you stabilize it by renting it, and then you repeat the process. And so I've done this time and time again. In the early years, I got excited on my first building because it took us 6 months, went and immediately bought another one that same year. Then we did a third one. And then the fourth one, I said, you know what? Why don't we build these suckers? And so I started buying dirt, and I started developing and building them from scratch. And that's where our development career really took off, is because we started scraping land and we started building buildings all over the Southwest. And so it really worked in our advantage. And so I'm not telling you guys to get to that extent unless you have the knowledge base. We just happen to be in the construction industry, and it just worked with what we were already doing. So anyways, you got to look at things when you're going into commercial real estate, ladies and gentlemen, in the same fashion as you would when you're going into residential real estate. It's no different. You might be dealing with larger acquisitions at some point in time, and that's why there's more benefits to it than there are residential, is because the income in commercial real estate is substantially bigger. Okay, they're telling me I need my mic in my mouth. I need to have this thing. I need to eat this thing like a popsicle because it's too far away and you guys can't hear me. So I'll pull that back in. So I organize for these things a little differently than the other ones. I want to make sure that I get all my notes hit here. And so we talk about financing. Now, do any of you, if you guys have questions, don't hesitate to ask them. You have any?
Can I run the number again?
Yeah, it's 505-610-1717. 505-610-1717. Okay, stabilizing your assets. People want to know, how do I stabilize my asset? Okay, we talked about financing options. We talked about ways to do that. And one word that came up a million times in there was stabilizing your asset. How do I do that? Now, when we go in and we purchase commercial real estate, we don't go in with our fingers crossed hoping that there's a market for what we're doing. We go in knowing that there's a market for what we're doing. And when you guys are looking at purchasing commercial real estate, you need to do things the same way. You can't function on hope. You can't function on just a dream. You have to function on logic. And one of the biggest mistakes most people make in both the residential and the commercial sector in real estate is that they go in speculating that there's an opportunity to do whatever they're doing. And they speculate that they're going to be able to lease a place. Well, we don't do that. What we do is we test the asset before we actually purchase it. So during our due diligence time, a lot of times people are always in a huge rush, right? We live in America, right? We live in an instantaneous society where we want things done yesterday. We want fast food cooked yesterday. We want TV dinners that we can cook yesterday, right? And that's just the society that we live in as Americans. And so nothing changes when we get into the real estate world. People are sitting back going, I want to buy this thing yesterday. In fact, I have investors that call me, and it's funny. They call me up and they're like, hey, Jerome, I can't find anything. And I'm like, holy shit, you've been looking for a damn week. Relax. You're not going to find anything. You know, if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. And so the real estate game is not a simple game. It's a business, just like anything. And that's what people have to understand. It takes diligence. You have to be in the game. You have to be planting seeds. You need to be out there underwriting deals. You can't, it's just not going to fall on your lap. You're not going to drive down the street and the first property you see isn't going to be the right property. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is. But traditionally, that's not the case. And so it takes time to understand how to play the game. Now, the best way to stabilize an asset is to have some logical information before you go into that property. Wouldn't you agree? Yes. And so one of the big things you need to know is there a market for what I'm doing? And so what we do is we always facilitate a minimum of a 60-day closing period, but typically we go after a minimum of a 90-day review period for any asset that we're buying. It's a lot easier now that we're doing larger assets because they're sitting back and they're going, yeah, there's some due diligence that needs to get done. The market is busy. It's hard to get engineers to go out there and do environmental inspections and get all the contractors to go out there and do our inspections on our behalf. So it's easier now. And there's a lot more understanding by the sellers for the gap time. But I always ask for an extended amount of closing time. And the reason being is, yes, I want to be able to go in and do my due diligence to make sure it has a good roof, a good structure, a good foundation, that there's no environmental issues on that property, like there was never a dry cleaners in there where they spilt chemicals that distress the property. And so I go in there and I do all of that due diligence, but the number one due diligence that I do on any property, any commercial asset that I buy, is I advertise it for lease prior to purchasing the property. I get a draftsman to simply go in and draw me up a cartoon image of what the property is going to look like once I actually finish the renovations. Now, in early years, I'll tell you, I didn't even use a draftsman. I had this young kid that was a graffiti artist that was just an incredible artist, and he would draw the buildings for me. And I'd pay him like $200 to draw out the buildings for me. God is my witness. This kid Ryan would come in. He's not a kid anymore, but back in those days, he was a kid right out of high school. And he was just looking for an opportunity. He had a kid at a young age. He needed opportunity. He'd come in, he'd draw the building for me on a piece of paper. We'd scan that thing and we'd advertise it. And we would put that thing out and say, hey, this is what our end product is going to look like. And we'd pre-lease it. And you can't enter into a lease prior to buying it. So you just ask the seller to agree that you advertise the property for lease prior to purchasing, with the understanding that you will not facilitate into a lease prior to taking ownership. But what this does is, if your phone doesn't ring and you get no interest, there's probably a good chance that you're going to have a complicated time leasing that property. So if there's no interest, there's no purchase. You don't buy it. You walk away from that property. But if you pre-market that property and your phone is ringing and there's interest in the property, even if you don't lease it or have people that are interested initially, they'll be the first to tell you what the problems are with that property, one. So now you know what you need to do to renovate it, to lease it to that type of person or that type of business. But not only that, you can find out if there's interest. And if there's interest, there's money. And where there's money, there's an opportunity. Where there's an opportunity, you, my friends, can all get wealthy in real estate. And that's how we always stabilize an asset. And so we go in and we do it. I remember I had a buddy years back, and where I learned this from was he showed me a piece of land. He goes, hey, Jerome, what do you think? Do you think there'd be a market for RVs, to be able to, for people to lease RV storage space on this property? And I said, I don't know. And back in those days, there was no internet. Well, the internet was there, but it wasn't used like it is today. And so he ran a simple classified ad in the newspaper saying, RV storage available. And he hadn't purchased the property yet. And he went in and he landed up getting tons inundated with phone calls, with people interested in storing their RVs on the property. And he sat back and says, oh my God, I'm going to buy this thing. I can fit X amount. He also went down, talked to the city and said, hey, can I get proper zoning to do what I want to do? And once he got those approvals during the due diligence period, during the inspection period of that purchase. And so he knew by the time he got to the purchase date that he had an asset that was going to work on his behalf. And that's, my friends, is how you facilitate interest and you stabilize that property prior to taking ownership. That's how you protect your money, protect your interest, and that's how you succeed in the commercial real estate game, which is absolutely an incredible way to make sure that your money is protected. Now, I want to talk to you guys about goals and kind of move into the ending of this with goals, because what happens with a lot of people is that they go into this blindly, and they, like I said before, they go in with hope and wishes, but no concrete way of creating any type of long-term wealth with real estate. And one of the biggest reasons is they never set goals. And so one of the things is that I tell people is, don't start off with these ridiculous goals that you're going to go out and buy a 100,000 square foot property unless you have experience in the real estate sector right now. But go in and set a goal that you're going to buy 3 properties over the next 3 years. And what if each one of those properties simply brought you in an extra $60,000 a year in passive income? You have 3 of them. That's $180,000 in passive income. Now, obviously, some of that's going to go towards expenses. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this, is once you stabilize a commercial asset, your expenses on the back end go way down. So you don't have the maintenance costs that you do like on a multifamily apartment complex where you're spending 40% of your income, of your gross operating income on expenses on that property. It's not like a residential dwelling that every time a toilet gets clogged and a light bulb goes out, you're out there servicing that property. With a commercial property, the tenants take care of those nominal repairs on your behalf. You just take care of the building structure itself, the roof and the walls, the roof and the walls, the roof and the walls. And they take care of everything else, including the asphalt, including the landscaping. All that's considered wear and tear, and they take care of it through common area fees. And so set a 3-year goal with 3 simple buildings. If you're a little more aggressive, take down 5 buildings in 3 years. But little 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 square foot buildings that you can acquire for under $350,000, stabilized, rent them. And I guarantee that when you come in and if you adapt the same training tools that I'm talking about right now, your cash on cash return is one, it's going to be bigger. Your asset's going to go up in value, and you're going to be a happier person because you're not having to constantly be fixing toilets, fixing air conditioners, and fixing all the nominal repairs that you do in a residential home. And your profit, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be substantially better. Okay? So the conclusion of all of this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, is that commercial real estate and commercial real estate investing is just simply more lucrative. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do something and it's just as hard to get into residential as it is commercial, and there's just as much work involved in it, doesn't it make more sense to be in something that's more lucrative than something less lucrative? This camera here? Okay. I'm looking at the wall over here to you guys, so I'm getting instructed where to be and where to talk so that you guys can hear me and see me. And so anyways, you guys want to see money coming back. And that's the end goal with real estate, with business. When you show up to work, I always tell people, I tell tenants sometimes, we come in, most of our stuff is managed by third-party management companies at this point in time, but we still in-house manage about 40 units of our commercial properties. And it's funny, I'll go in and I'll talk to them, and they try to negotiate ridiculous lease rates sometimes, especially newbies, people that aren't experienced in it. I tell them, let me ask you a question. When you wake up in the morning and you go to work, do you go in with the intent to work as a good deed and just work for free? Or do you wake up in the morning wanting a return on your time and your interest? And they say, yeah, the second. And I tell them, real estate works the same way. This is a business, just like you waking up in the morning. You have to make a profit. And if you're going to go in and you're going to buy a single family home, you're going to work on Saturdays and Sundays, you're going to be up there repairing things at the wee hours of the night. Now, do you have the intent of doing that for free? Or do you have the intent of doing that for a return on your investment? And if you guys are like me, I don't want to work for free. I don't want to go out and change toilets. I don't want to go out there fixing electrical problems in the middle of the night. I don't want to go out there taking care of this, that, and the other at the wee hours for free. You know what I want to be able to do? I want to be able to have the affordability to call somebody else to do that for me. I want to be able to have an asset class that I can go in, and if they call me and say, hey, here's a copy of your lease, you guys are responsible for that, call a pro. Call a pro. I'm not that pro. I own the building. I leased it to you. Get it fixed. It's in your lease. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I love commercial real estate, is because I can tell them to pick up a phone, call somebody else. They're responsible for it, not myself. Unless something's caving in on the roof, and as long as the walls aren't falling in, I'm protected. And so that, my friends, is why commercial real estate is so much funner to me, and so is because it's so much more lucrative and so much easier long term. And so I want you guys to go out this week. You really want to get involved in commercial real estate, you got homework to do. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you can't do this game if you're not involved in the game. You have to, people sit back and they go, okay, how do you find deals? Well, the way you find deals is you got to be a part of the game. You're not going to find deals. It's kind of like being single, right? You go out and people go, well, I don't understand how someone finds a good man, or I don't understand how someone finds a good woman. Well, you can't find them sitting on your couch in your home. That's for sure. You got to get out there. You got to market yourself, right? You got to be at places where there's good people, whether it's church or wherever, or nightclubs, wherever you find them, wherever it is. Now, the real estate game, You got to be where there's brokers. You got to be where there's real estate. You got to be out in the game. You got to be driving around. You got to be finding locations where there's stuff for sale. And you got to be calling these brokers, people that know where the inventory is. And you have to start forming relationships with them. So your homework this week is to do just that, is for you to get involved in the game. 90% of the reason 90% of people fail in real estate is because they never get started in the game. And if you want to succeed in this game, the only way to succeed in this game is to get started in it. Look, it doesn't cost you no money to get started in this game. You just have to get started, and you have to go out there, and it's called sweat equity. You have to start shopping deals, because as you start shopping deals, you're going to start learning a lot. You're going to learn a lot about people. You're going to learn a lot about real estate, and you're going to learn a lot about what to do and what not to do. And the only way to do that is to pick up the phone. Can't be embarrassed to talk to commercial brokers. They're human, just like you and I. They're a professional, just like you and I. The only difference is they're in a different trade, in a different profession. They will talk to you, I promise you. They will pick up the phone. They will talk to you. There's some with huge egos, but even the commercial brokers have smaller egos than a lot of the residential brokers who are substantially who are substantially less affluent than they are. Most of them are broke. The commercial brokers actually do pretty well, and some of them extremely well. And so understand that those professionals, if you're a professional, they will talk to you. And so your goal for this week is to go out and just take a look at 20 deals. You don't have to underwrite them. Just find 20 deals. 20 deals. They don't even have to be deals that fit your parameters. Just 20 commercial deals. I want you to look at them. I want you to ask for the financials. I want you guys to go out and collect them and look at them. Don't just collect them and stick them in a briefcase or stick them in a corner in your office at home. I want you guys to get them, and I want you guys to start looking at the acquisition prices. I want you guys to start looking at the financials, learning how to talk to brokers, looking at the properties, even driving the properties. But this week, do 20. You can do it on your spare time in the office, at lunch, and your lunch hour. You can pull that stuff up. The girls here in my office do it for us all day long. They're not real estate professionals. They're just professionals, professional admins and professionals because they work with us. If they can do it, I guarantee you can do it too. And so what I'd like to see each and every one of you guys do is over the next 7 days, when we come back next Friday, I would love some feedback on what you've learned and what you've figured out in the last 7 days looking at those 20 properties and in understanding the opportunities that are involved in commercial real estate. Ladies and gentlemen, how far into this are we right now, Al?
Let's see here, 107.
107, cool. So we're right at an hour. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the commercial real estate game. And this is Real Talk on Fridays with Jerome Maldonado. And so I want to bring this to you live, and they're going to get better and better and better every single week.
Give us a call, PM.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we want you guys to call in, be a part of what we're doing. You guys can reach out to us, 505-610-1717 on this live call. You have any questions, we can service your calls. Look, ladies and gentlemen, if you like content just like this, and this information has been super valuable to you in a small way, a big way, or any way at all, I want you guys to give us a big thumbs up on the bottom. I want you guys to pound that thumbs up button right now and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us so that way we can give you more real estate insight, more real estate information every Friday live with Real Estate Talk with Jerome Maldonado. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you guys and I congratulate you guys for taking the time to invest in you this morning, and I look forward to seeing you guys next Friday. Thank you so much, and God bless. Down? Done?
There
Cool.
it is.
Cool.